Khamzat Chimaev might be genuinely one of the most terrifying people on the planet. That guy is terrifying. And he is the new UFC middleweight champion after completely dominating Dricus du Plessis last night and just honestly making Dricus du Plessis look like a child. Like, Dricus du Plessis couldn't do anything. He had barely any moments, and Khamzat Chimaev just basically, in what I predicted to be an anticlimactic fight, I mean, he didn't get the finish in the first round, but he just completely dominated Dricus du Plessis for 5 rounds. And the rest of the card was phenomenal. I thoroughly enjoyed this card. It really did end up living up to the hype for the most part. Of course, a lot of people have mixed feelings about this main event, but the rest of the card was really, really good. I'm glad most of the fights stayed intact because there were a couple cancellations, but overall, an amazing card that I really enjoyed. So let's recap everything. We're going to start with the title fight main event. Khamzat Chimaev is the UFC middleweight champion. We were anticipating this to be the best fight of the year. It definitely had all the makings to be, but Dricus du Plessis had no response and no answer for Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev went in there and completely just dominated Dricus. He outstruck him he had over 500 significant strikes to Dricus du Plessis, who had about 50-something total strikes. You see right here, 529 strikes to Dricus du Plessis' 45, 12 takedowns. Khamzat Chimaev, is probably the best wrestler and grappler we have seen in the UFC in a very long time, and just a terrifying talent. I was getting chills and goosebumps when they first were announcing them, and they finally were both staring each other down, and just the entire build-up for it was insane. And in that first 20 seconds, it was really just chaotic. Khamzat went in there and wasted no time in shooting the immediate takedown. And then for a quick moment there, Dricus had Khamzat Chimaev in a bad position, and it almost looked like Dricus might have this crazy choke. And then Khamzat Chimaev went out of it and pretty much had the control time for the rest of the round. And it just went downhill from there. Any concerns about Khamzat Chimaev's gas tank are out the window after this fight. There was no issues with his gas tank. There was no issues with cardio for Khamzat Chimaev. Every single round, he shot his takedowns, and Dricus du Plessis had no answers. Dricus du Plessis said, he's going to take me down, but I'm for sure going to get back up. But he never got back up. He never got back up from Dric. And then I'm sure it's one of the most frustrating things when Dricus du Plessis is in several crucifixes positions throughout the fight. Khamzat Chimaev had him in crucifix, just battering him with hammer fists, control time, all of it, and Dricus du Plessis was just helpless. And this just really showed that I guess it wasn't as high level of a matchup as we all thought. Because while Dricus du Plessis, we thought he was this really well-rounded champion, he takes over in later rounds. There was none of that throughout this entire fight. Just Khamzat Chimaev going after it every single round. Every single round started with, you're like, okay, he made it to round 3. Maybe Dricus finally will get it going now that we haven't seen Khamzat really get to that point. And then Khamzat just goes in there, shoots the takedown, Dricus is down. It was just so crazy to see Dricus du Plessis like that, being dominated. And really, he just lost a lot of aura after this fight. Dricus, I'm sure, is still very high level, and I hope he could bounce back because he had a great title reign. But yeah, Khamzat Chimaev is just a different level, a level that Dricus has never faced, and Dricus really did not make it interesting until the very end, and that was barely even anything. So yeah, Khamzat Chimaev is the UFC middleweight champion. Clearly one of the biggest stars in the UFC from the pop he got at the press conference. Hopefully he's going to be an active champion. And for everyone that's complaining that it's a boring fight, sure, it's not exciting or flashy with no TKOs and keeping on the feet, but that's just Khamzat Chimaev. You have to understand, that's what you're really getting with Khamzat Chimaev, just the high level wrestling and grappling. It might not be the most entertaining or flashy, but that's just a display of complete high-level wrestling and grappling, which is a big part. And that's really Khamzat Chimaev's game. He doesn't really keep it on the feet that much. It's only if Dricus managed to always stuff the takedowns, which clearly wasn't working for him. So why would Khamzat continue to just keep it on the feet? I mean, Mark Goddard did give Dricus du Plessis a couple chances with the stand-up, and then Khamzat just went right back at it. But really, that shouldn't have even been made because Khamzat really was still keeping it active on the ground and just battering up Dricus du Plessis. But Dricus du Plessis, whatever, he was in good spirits each and every beginning of the round. He's like trying to hype up the crowd. He's smiling. And you just thought he was going to finally take it into gear, and he never got it going. So, yeah, that was what a masterclass performance by Khamzat Chimaev. Maybe we see him. I highly doubt it. I mean, Khamzat Chimaev's so big, I don't think they could put him as a co-main in Abu Dhabi. And also, who would he fight? Because Baralio and Imavov are booked. And unless one of them really isn't injured after that fight, that would be really close of a turnaround. You could put Anthony Hernandez. That could be really fun. Or you could put Reinier de Ridder as Khamzat Chimaev's first title defense in Abu Dhabi. But that's just a stretch. I mean, Khamzat Chimaev's so big, I think you just have to have him headline. Just hopefully he stays active and hopefully he fights. But really, I don't see anyone beating Khamzat Chimaev in the middleweight division. Anthony Hernandez might be the closest thing to giving Khamzat Chimaev some good tests with wrestling and on the ground after the kind of performance he had with Roman Dolidze. But he hasn't really fought anyone very, very high level yet, Anthony Hernandez. He's still building, but he's right there. And he had like a Marab type performance versus Roman Dolidze. He just basically also complete domination on Roman Dolidze and then choked him and dragged him like a kid in that fight. Maybe Reinier de Ridder could be interesting, but I don't think anybody could handle this from Khamzat Chimaev. He seems to just be shooting takedowns and taking down people at will in every single fight. And clearly the cardio and gas tank isn't an issue because he did not let up for any of those rounds. 5-round championship fight, went the full 5 rounds, and Khamzat Chimaev was still there doing his dominating performance. And I don't think anyone really will beat him. Not Imavov, not Kyle Baralio, not Anthony Hernandez, and not Reinier de Ridder, because that's kind of like the cue in the middleweight division on the next guys up to fight for this title. So, yeah, Khamzat Chimaev, just terrifying. You look at this picture, like, went back to the clean shape, like the bald look. Just so scary. I mean, it was really fun for the first couple seconds of that first round. But then quickly it just became that realization, like, this is how the rest of the fight's going to go. And, yeah. So, that was your main event. Biggest fight of the year. Ended up being kind of like that. But, yeah, Khamzat Chimaev, just a different level. Different level of a fighter. One of the scariest fighters in the UFC. And we waited a long time to see him in this position, fight for a title. And now he's the champ. He is the champion. He's going to be put on pound for pound. Yeah, unbelievable. And for Dricus, yeah, I mean, hopefully he could bounce back. He's probably still, we could think that he's a very high level middleweight, but yeah, he had a great run. He was really on the verge of becoming the middleweight GOAT had he beaten Khamzat Chimaev. I just thought, like, we all probably thought we could expect a little bit more from him, and you just didn't get it. Nothing. Next up, Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico. I mean, this was the second of the back-to-back spinning elbow knockout KOs between Murphy and Prates. We'll get to Prates in a minute. But this was Lerone Murphy's coming out party. And Aaron Pico, the hype has died for Aaron Pico. This is such a bad look for just these other promotion fighters making their debut. Like, you have Kai Asakura down on the card. We'll get to him too. That was pathetic and embarrassing. They got to stop. The UFC's got to just learn their lesson about giving these fighters these big spots. Now, don't get me wrong. Pico looked really sharp in the first couple of minutes of this fight. He definitely looked sharp with his boxing, doing these nasty uppercuts in the clinch. He came out very aggressive versus Lerone Murphy, like he was hungry and had something to prove, to be able to take this undefeated guy and make a statement out of him to really introduce himself to the UFC fan base that he is worthy of a title shot. And, this big hype, because we haven't had a Bellator fighter really come out and do something big in their debut. They've just been losing, like Pitbull and Patchy. So you kind of felt like maybe Pico could finally do something with it, but just so reckless, because even though he was coming out really aggressive and looked really clean and sharp, he was coming out very aggressive, really reckless, and it ended up costing him clearly, because Lerone Murphy ended up getting a little bit of his groove back later in the first round, and then just caught Pico as clean as it could get with a elbow into the side of his dome, flatlined, and Lerone Murphy is here. 17-0, probably just skipped Movsar for a title shot. I mean, do we really forget about Movsar? But honestly, Lerone Murphy with a performance like that, I would definitely be so down for him to fight Volk next. Probably in December is when Volk called him out. And that would be a great next title fight for Volk, because Volk, as we know, is very limited on fights. The next one could be the last one for Volkanovski. So it's really, we got to see. He might only have 2 fights left in him. So Lerone Murphy, put him up. That's a great fight. Undefeated. And has just been doing it at all different types of levels. But this was really the first, this was definitely the biggest win for Lerone Murphy. The biggest finish for Lerone Murphy on a big card like that, with a KO like that in the first round. And Pico, just give him some bum, please. Make these guys look somewhat decent so they could be worth the contract signing. So that was that fight. Lerone Murphy, sick KO. And then Carlos Prates, the Nightmare. This is exactly what we needed. Carlos Prates to bounce back, and he did it, and completely just regained all his swag, everything after losing to Ian Gary. Went in there versus Jeff Neal and was looking really sharp, really clean, was using good distance management and movement. He was definitely moving a lot. And you thought, okay, oh boy, this is going to be a good one. But I already sensed that someone was getting KO'd in this fight. And I'm so glad it wasn't Prates. In the final seconds of the first round, Prates, literally in the last 5 seconds, throws a nice little half elbow at Jeff Neal, and then does the spinning elbow on the side of Jeff Neal's head. I was really concerned for Jeff Neal. Dude was out. He did not look great at all. These guys could have serious brain damage from these kind of KOs. Pico and Jeff Neal, the way these guys were looking on the ground with their, Jeff Neal's eyes were red after that. That was just lethal, absolutely lethal from Prates. He already, I thought, was winning that first round, and then I was sensing him to come with a knockout in the second. But Prates does it at the buzzer beater of the first round. Sick KO. He's back. Carlos Prates is back. And lighting up the SIGs at the press conference. Talking already about returning to UFC Rio, which would be perfect. And he called out Leon Edwards. That would be a great fight. Also, Michael Venom Page and Carlos Prates both said they wanted each other for Rio after their wins. So that could be fun too. I'm very curious about that fight for Michael Venom Page versus Carlos Prates, because as we know, MVP, the fight right before this, super elusive, super hard to hit, super difficult. How would a rangy striker like Carlos Prates, who looked really sharp in this fight with targeting and sniping some really good strikes, how would he do versus a guy like that in MVP? And for Jeff Neal, he definitely was looking to make it a fun fight. In the first round, it wasn't like he was trying to clinch and grapple with Carlos Prates. It looked like it was going to be a good stand-up. But yeah, Prates catches him. Night for Jeff Neal. And Prates has won 4 out of his last 5 fights, I think, in his UFC run so far. Right? He was undefeated in the UFC and then only lost to Ian Gary. But in all his fights so far in the UFC were stunning KOs and finishes. The fighting nerds are just different. Super happy that Prates bounced back to get this win. And yeah. MVP versus Jared Cannonier. This was a really just entertaining fight. MVP, I don't know. I have mixed feelings because, sure, it's entertaining when he's smiling and doing all his antics and hopping around the octagon, pretending to dribble a basketball. It must be so annoying for a guy to fight this dude. This dude's just like smiling and just dodging all your, like Jared Cannonier was really trying to get at him and he was getting frustrated and just started grappling with him and clinching him up against, because that's the only thing he really could do, because he had no success in trying to land some strikes on MVP. And MVP, of course, had his 2 knockdowns, one in the first round, another one in the second. But then he was just like letting him get back up, just toying with him. I don't know. I don't really know if I like that kind of style. Like, is MVP just looking to ink out decisions with doing just enough to let the crowd, cheer him on, or is like actually look to finish fights with MVP? He hasn't really done any like finishes. So I don't know with his style of fighting. And also Jared Cannonier did have the ground control in the final round, which maybe put up an argument, but I guess wasn't enough for him to win the fight. So Michael Venom Page wins the fight. And as I just mentioned, they might put him up against Carlos Prates in Brazil. So Michael Venom Page has won 3 out of his first 4 fights in the UFC, I think. He beat Kevin Holland, lost to Gary, beat Chara, and now has beaten Jared Cannonier. So Michael Venom Page has had more success, and I guess I realized that the Prates fight would mean him going back down to welterweight, so I guess he's just fluctuating. Yeah, so these fights right here, all really fun, really, and then Kai Asakura just making the UFC look really bad for putting him in a title position in his first fight with Alexander Pantoja. When you lose to a guy like Tim Elliott, yeah, that's what I was saying, is like Kai Asakura needed to win his fight, and he just got submitted in the second round again. This time to 38-year-old Tim Elliott, who hasn't fought in who knows how long, out here looking like he's homeless, even though he got the cut. So Tim Elliott submits Kai Asakura. Kai Asakura was looking really fast. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Okay, we'll finally get to see Kai Asakura showcase versus a guy like this, but with his quick hands, and maybe do a flying knee, and just nothing. And Tim Elliott goes in and submits him. So Kai Asakura, really bad look. He might be like 2 losses away from getting cut from the UFC. Hopefully the UFC could work on a better, even more favorable bum matchup for Kai Asakura on like some prelims. Because, yeah, Kai Asakura, yeah, not aging well. This was actually a really great fight in replacement of the King Green fight. Bansangur, Sursurkaev versus Eric Nolan. And this was a really competitive first-round fight. Bansangur, of course, amazing story. 4-day turnaround after getting a stomach kick KO on the Contender Series. Gets put on a big card like this. And was even put on the press conference. So a lot of hype on this guy. Khamzat Chimaev's teammate. And he 10-0 now. Goes in there and was looking really cocky in the beginning. Smiling. Doing some movements. Of the kind of MVP type vibe with Eric Nolan. And Eric Nolan was looking really good, honestly, with his combinations, his jabs. And some good exchanges. Competitive fight. Eric Nolan wasn't letting him completely dominate him on the ground in that first round. Bansangur was just kind of like... And then was getting clipped, but he's like smiling at him. He's still like, yeah, bring it on. And then in the final minute of that round, Eric Nolan was putting it on Bansangur, and Bansangur got saved by the bell. Eric Nolan had him hurt. He had him hurt at the end of that first round. And then going into the second, then Bansangur turns it up, ends up taking Eric Nolan to the ground, and then submits him. But as Dana White said, respect to Nolan for coming in there, putting on a good fight. They're going to rebook him. Just for stepping up and taking this fight in short notice. But yeah, Sursurkaev, really great story so far. Comes in, Dana White Contender Series, same week, 4 days notice. That's 2 finished wins in a week for the 24-year-old. Clearly still has a lot to learn and to gain in his experience in the UFC, but not bad for a 24-year-old who's just getting started in the UFC. And yeah, this was a fantastic fight in the prelims of Bansangur, Sursurkaev. Great story. Michael Olszewczuk TKOs Gerald Meerschaert in the first round. The card honestly went really quick for the most part. A lot of first round finishes. So yeah, like I said, just great card. So Michael Zaechuk, great KO versus Gerald Meerschaert. Yeah, Meerschaert, just the vet, whatever. Just throwing him against anyone and seeing who comes out. And then, yeah, Alexander Hernandez, who saw this coming? KOs Chase Hooper in the final minutes again of a first round. You know, Chase Hooper was looking like this real great lightweight threat on the ground. But he was beating old guys like Jim Miller and Clay Guida. And look at this. Alexander Hernandez comes out and did what he did to Chase Hooper. So Chase Hooper, kind of his hype is killed now. And yeah, great finish on the prelims. You got Drakkar Klose beating Edson Barbosa, Karine Silva beating Dion Barbosa, and Joseph Morales beating Alibi Idris in the tough finale. So yeah, again, just fantastic card. I really enjoyed it. And then, of course, the biggest moments of the night coming back to back with 2 out of like 10 spinning like elbow KOs in UFC history. And you had 2 of them on the same card back to back with Murphy and Prates. And then, of course, Khamzat Chimaev with the just dominant performance to become your new UFC middleweight champion. So that's my thoughts on UFC 319. And yeah, until next time.